It was an ordinary afternoon when John decided to take a stroll through the local junkyard. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the piles of discarded metal, old vehicles, and broken machinery. John had always been fascinated by junkyards. To him, they were like treasure chests filled with hidden gems, old gadgets, rusted tools, and forgotten relics, all waiting for someone to breathe new life into them. He wasn't looking for anything special that day. Just passing time and maybe picking up a few parts for his DIY projects. The clanking of metal as he wandered through the yard filled the air, mingling with the distant hum of traffic from the street outside. John was used to seeing the usual array of junk, old cars, discarded household items, and machinery past its prime. But something caught his eye as he ventured deeper into the junkyard. It wasn't the usual mix of scrap metal. No, this was different. In the farthest corner, barely visible beneath a pile of broken-down engines and scrap, was something that stood out. It looked out of place, an object that seemed untouched by time. Curious, John approached it. The object, half covered in rust and grime, resembled a spaceship. It was a massive structure, its sleek body barely visible beneath layers of dirt and rust. The curved metallic surface shimmered faintly under the afternoon light. A spaceship? In a junkyard? It didn't make sense. But there it was, just sitting, there as though waiting for someone to notice it. John leaned in closer. He brushed away some of the dirt and debris, revealing more of the ship's surface. The design was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was ancient, worn down by years of neglect, but there was something captivating about it. Its shape, the way the edges curved, suggested it wasn't a typical vehicle. It was something much more advanced. A strange feeling began to stir in the pit of John's stomach. He ran his fingers along the ship's surface, tracing the cold, metallic texture. It was smooth, almost unnaturally smooth, and yet it looked as though it had been forgotten for centuries. Despite its appearance, John could tell that the ship wasn't just any old junk. There was something unique about it, something special. His mind raced, trying to piece together how such a thing ended up in a junkyard. Who would throw away a spaceship? Why was it here? And why did it feel like it was calling to him? John turned around and made his way to the junkyard's owner, an old man who was sitting on a weathered wooden chair, watching him with mild curiosity. The owner had seen John wandering around the yard, but hadn't paid much attention to him. The junkyard was a place for scavengers after all. People came and went, always looking for things they didn't need or things that could be fixed and reused. "Hey, I found something," John called out, his voice hesitant. The old man didn't look up at first, but then, after a pause, he slowly turned his head. "What did you find, son?" the old man asked, his voice raspy as though he hadn't spoken in years. John hesitated before answering. "It's a spaceship. It's buried over there under some scrap." The old man chuckled softly. "A spaceship, huh? You've got a good imagination, I'll give you that. But we don't have spaceships around here. Just junk." But John wasn't convinced. The closer he got to the ship, the more certain he became that this was no ordinary piece of junk. Something about it felt alive, like it was waiting for him. "I'm serious," John said, his voice steadying. "You might want to come take a look." Reluctantly, the old man stood up and walked over to where John was standing. He squinted as he looked at the rusty ship, then shook his head. "Well, I'll be damned. That is a spaceship, all right. What in the world is it doing here?" John felt a chill run down his spine. He wasn't the only one who saw it. The old man's reaction only confirmed his suspicions. This wasn't a hoax. The ship was real. It was ancient, yes, but it was real. And it had somehow found its way to this junkyard, as if it had been discarded, forgotten by everyone. Until now. "Well, it's yours if you want it," the old man said, scratching his beard thoughtfully. "I was about to haul it off for scrap, but if you're interested, I'll let it go for $100. $100? John could hardly believe what he was hearing. He thought about it for a moment. A spaceship for $100. It was almost too good to be true. And yet, there was something that pushed him to act. Without a second thought, John pulled out his wallet and handed the old man the money. The old man didn't even bat an eye. He took the money, shrugged, and handed John the keys to the yard. "It's yours now," he said, "but be careful. You never know what kind of things you're buying at a junk sale." John didn't listen to the warning. He was too focused on the ship, now fully his. He stared at it, feeling a rush of excitement mixed with uncertainty. He had no idea what he had just bought, but there was no turning back now. As John walked away, the spaceship seemed to hum, almost as if it was coming to life. Its once dormant systems seemed to stir. The lights inside flickered faintly, casting a soft glow through the cracked windows. And as he glanced back at it, John couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. The story had just begun. And for John, the adventure of a lifetime was about to unfold. John had barely made it home when he began to feel the weight of the decision he had just made. Standing in his garage, staring at the rusted spaceship in front of him, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with unease. What had he gotten himself into? The ship, though old and covered in layers of dirt, seemed to be calling out to him. The low hum that had filled the air at the junkyard hadn't stopped. It was faint but constant, like a soft heartbeat coming from deep within the ship. The lights flickered every so often, casting long shadows across the garage. John shook his head, trying to clear his mind. Maybe it was just his imagination running wild. After all, it was just a broken spaceship, right? He took a deep breath, determined to figure out what was going on. The first thing he did was approach the control panel inside the ship. It was unlike any technology he had ever seen. The buttons were worn, some of them barely visible beneath the layers of grime. But there were also strange symbols glowing faintly. The air inside the spaceship was cooler than in the garage, and as John reached for the nearest button, the hum grew louder, almost as though the ship was reacting to his presence. "Okay," he muttered to himself. "Let's see what you can do." He pressed the button. At first, nothing happened. The ship's hum remained steady and the lights flickered once again. But then something extraordinary occurred. A soft metallic click echoed through the ship, followed by a series of whirs and beeps. The control panel lit up with bright, neon blue lights. John jumped back, his heart racing. The ship was alive. The once rusty panels began to glow, and as if on cue, the central core of the spaceship powered up. The ship's systems were awakening, piece by piece. A series of holographic images popped up in midair, showing symbols and strange maps of uncharted territories. John squinted at the images, trying to understand what they meant. His mind raced. Was this alien technology? Had he just stumbled upon something the world had forgotten? The lights inside the spaceship grew brighter, and a low rumble filled the air, like a distant thunderstorm. John's heart pounded in his chest. He took a cautious step forward and reached out to touch the central console. As soon as his fingers made contact, the ship seemed to react to him. A jolt of energy surged through his body, and for a brief moment, his vision blurred. He could feel a strange connection, like the ship and he were somehow linked, as if the ship was recognizing him as its new master. The rumble grew louder, and the control panels began to shift on their own. The ship's engine systems powered up, and the hum turned into a deep, resonant tone, vibrating through the walls of the garage. The ship was coming to life, but John didn't know why it had chosen him. Why had it awakened now after all these years? Suddenly, a voice crackled through the intercom system. John froze. The voice was in a language he didn't understand. The words were soft, melodic, but filled with urgency. It sounded almost like a command, and the tone of the voice was both reassuring and terrifying at the same time. The voice echoed through the spaceship, bouncing off the walls, and John instinctively stepped back, his heart racing. He had no idea what was happening, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a junkyard find. He scrambled to find the ship's manual or any kind of instruction, but there was nothing. The ship seemed to be guiding itself, adapting to him, responding to his touch and presence. His fingers hovered over the control buttons, unsure of what to press next. He could hear the ship's systems whirring and clicking, like it was preparing for something. But for what? John walked over to the cockpit, his hands shaking. He slid into the seat, and the moment he did, the seat molded to fit his body perfectly, as though it had been designed just for him. The display in front of him flickered to life, showing more strange symbols and alien maps. Then, the ship's voice spoke again, but this time, the words were clearer. They were still in a foreign language, but now, there was a translation displayed on the screen. Activation complete. Awaiting commands. John's pulse quickened. Activation complete? It was as though the ship had been waiting for something, waiting for him. The strange voice seemed almost like it was inviting him to explore its depths. He swallowed hard. This was more than just a spaceship. It was a piece of history, alive, intelligent, and waiting for its next chapter. Okay, John whispered to himself, his voice barely audible. What do you want me to do? Suddenly, the ship lurched forward. The whole structure seemed to shake, and for a moment John was thrown off balance. The ship's energy surged, and the control panel flashed with new instructions. The ship was becoming operational at a rapid pace. The walls of the garage seemed to fade away, replaced by images of stars and distant galaxies. The spaceship wasn't just in the garage anymore, it was everywhere. The more John interacted with the ship, the more it seemed to respond. He could feel the energy growing stronger, as though the ship was becoming more aware of him. But as the lights grew brighter and the ship hummed louder, John felt a sense of unease. What if this wasn't a gift? What if this ship wasn't meant to be found, let alone activated? John looked around the room, the eerie hum of the ship's engine filling the space. The ship was alive, and it had awakened for a reason. But what was that reason? And more importantly, why him? The ship's system seemed to know what he was thinking, as if it could read his mind. The glowing symbols on the control panel shifted, forming a new message. Traveler, you have been chosen. John had no idea what he was dealing with. Every time he touched the controls, the ship responded with more energy, more force, as if it were trying to communicate with him. The walls of the cockpit pulsed with a strange, otherworldly light, and the mysterious symbols that filled the screens now seemed to shift and change, almost like they were alive. The ship had power, more power than John could even begin to comprehend. But with that power came something far more dangerous. As the ship's systems activated, the once dormant intercom crackled again, but this time, it wasn't just the strange voice he had heard before. A new presence seemed to fill the air, deep and cold, an echoing command that seemed to resonate within the very structure of the ship. Prepare for awakening, traveler. The ship is yours to control, but at a cost. John's heart raced. What cost? He could feel the energy surging through the ship like a living thing. The ship had been dormant for so long, but now it was alive, and it was looking to him for answers. But what if he wasn't prepared for the responsibility it demanded? He gripped the controls tighter, trying to steady his breath. The more he interacted with the ship, the more the ship seemed to react. The walls around him hummed louder, and a soft vibration filled the air. John could feel his fingers tingling, as though the ship was feeding its energy directly into him. Suddenly, a holographic display flashed in front of him. The symbols he had seen earlier now swirled and merged into an image of a planet far away, one that looked like a war-torn world. Buildings were in ruins, and the skies were filled with dark, swirling clouds. In the center of the planet, a glowing symbol pulsed almost as if it were calling out to him. A map appeared beside it, showing a path leading straight to that planet. The ship's voice crackled again, its tone much colder than before. You must go there. Only then will you unlock your true potential. John's mind spun. He didn't know what the planet was or why the ship had chosen it, but there was something in the urgency of the message that made him feel like he had no choice. The ship was not giving him options. It was commanding him. The power it held seemed to pull at his very soul, compelling him to obey. But John wasn't a soldier, and he wasn't some kind of intergalactic hero. He was just a man who had bought a rusty spaceship from a junkyard. Why had the ship chosen him? What was it about him that had made it react this way? His hands hovered over the controls, unsure. He could feel the ship's power, a living, breathing force, ready to take flight. The ship was waiting for him to make the next move, but John wasn't ready. He didn't want to play a part in some cosmic battle he didn't understand. But the ship wasn't giving him a choice. The humming grew louder, almost deafening now, and the controls seemed to pulse under his fingertips, as if urging him to take action. John's heart raced. Every instinct told him to stop, to abandon the ship and run away from whatever madness had begun. But deep down he knew he couldn't. The ship had chosen him, and whether he liked it or not, he was now part of something far bigger than himself. As John sat in the cockpit, unsure of his next move, the voice returned, this time softer, almost pleading. You are not alone in this. The enemies are already on their way. You must decide. Control the ship, or lose everything. John glanced at the map again. The planet, the symbol, it was all so confusing. But the more he looked at it, the more a sense of urgency washed over him. If he didn't take control now, he might never get another chance. The ship's voice seemed to be warning him, but the message was clouded in mystery. What enemies? What enemies were coming? Before he could think it through any further, the ship jolted unexpectedly. The force knocked him against his seat, and the lights in the cockpit flickered. A series of beeps and alarms went off, and John's breath caught in his throat. The ship was under attack. He could feel it. The ship was reacting to something outside, something far more dangerous than he had imagined. The ship's hull shook as though it was being battered by an unseen force. The screens flashed red and the ship's power level spiked. John instinctively grabbed the controls and tried to steady the ship, but it was no use. The ship was struggling to maintain control just like he was. Through the intercom, the voice spoke again, more urgent now. Enemies have found us. The ship will not survive unless you gain control. John's pulse raced as the reality of the situation hit him. He was in the middle of something he didn't understand, facing an enemy he couldn't even see. And yet the ship, the ancient, powerful ship, was depending on him to take charge. He had to act now or risk losing everything. He took a deep breath and forced himself to focus. The ship was alive, but it was also at his mercy. If he didn't take control, the ship would be destroyed, and so would he. John knew there was no turning back now. With shaking hands, he activated the ship's defense systems. The ship responded instantly, its exterior glowing with energy as it powered up. The vibrations in the air intensified, and John could feel the raw power coursing through the ship. He was no longer just an observer, he was the one in control. The ship's systems synchronized with his every movement as though it was anticipating his commands. He pressed a series of buttons, and a holographic screen appeared, showing an enemy ship in the distance. It was enormous, dark, and menacing. John's heart skipped a beat. Whatever this enemy was, it was not something he could fight alone, but he wasn't alone. The ship was with him. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. With newfound determination, John powered up the weapons, systems, and locked onto the enemy ship. It was time to fight back. The struggle for control was just beginning, and John was about to learn just how far he was willing to go to protect the ship and himself. The atmosphere in the cockpit was thick with tension as John gripped the controls. With both hands, the ship hummed beneath him, the energy pulsing through the very walls of the cockpit. He could feel the ship's power, and it was like an extension of himself, alive, responsive, and ready to take him anywhere he commanded. But right now, John wasn't just controlling a ship. He was facing a decision that would define the rest of his life. The enemy ship loomed outside, a massive, menacing presence in the vastness of space. It was closing in, fast, and John could see its dark silhouette on the screen. His heart pounded in his chest, and for a moment the world outside the cockpit seemed to disappear. He was alone in this moment, alone with the ship and the power it offered. There was no time to second-guess himself, no time for hesitation. If he didn't act now, the ship, the only thing that had chosen him, would be destroyed. And worse, he would never know the truth behind the mission it had called him to fulfill. The voice from the ship's intercom crackled once again, but this time, it was different. It was softer, almost pleading. Traveler, it is time. The path forward is yours to choose. The battle has begun. Will you fight for your survival, or will you succumb to the fate that awaits? John's eyes locked onto the enemy ship, which was now only moments away. His mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened. He had discovered the ship by accident, but in a strange way he felt destined to be here. The ship had awakened for him, and now it was up to him to unlock its final secret. He knew he had two choices. He could try to flee, abandon the ship, and disappear into the unknown, or he could stand and fight. Escape was always the easier option, the safer one, but deep down, John knew he wasn't the type of person who could run when faced with a challenge this big. The ship had chosen him for a reason. John's hands were shaking as he activated the ship's defense systems once again. The controls lit up, glowing a bright blue as the ship powered up. The engines roared to life, and John could feel the immense energy coursing through the ship, filling him with a sense of power that was both exhilarating and terrifying. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for something greater than himself. The ship, its ancient purpose, and the destiny it had in store for him. As the enemy ship drew nearer, John's mind cleared. He could no longer afford to be afraid. His fingers danced across the control panel, activating the weapon systems. The ship responded with a sudden fierce surge of energy. He could feel the connection between them, like they were working together, moving as one. The power of the ship was his now. He just had to trust in himself. And the ship. "This is your moment, traveler." The ship's voice echoed once again. "You have been chosen. Now take control of your destiny." With those words echoing in his mind, John steeled himself for the fight ahead. The enemy ship was closing in fast, and he had no idea how powerful it was. But he had something it didn't. A ship that trusted him, a ship that had chosen him to be its pilot. And with that trust came power. John locked onto the enemy ship and activated the ship's weapons. A series of blindingly bright lasers shot out, striking the enemy vessel with incredible force. The enemy ship tried to retaliate, but John was ready. He dodged and weaved through space, the ship's advanced systems guiding him with precision. Each move was calculated, each decision made in the heat of the moment. But then something unexpected happened. The enemy ship, after taking several hits, began to slow. Its energy shields flickered and it started to drift. The fight wasn't over, but it was clear that John's decisive move had turned the tide. The enemy wasn't as strong as it had seemed, and it was retreating. For the first time since this battle began, John felt a glimmer of hope. He couldn't believe it. He had done it. The enemy ship was retreating, its weapons disabled and its shields failing. The ship was powerless against the force John had unleashed. And it wasn't just the ship, it was him. The connection he had formed with the spaceship, the trust it had placed in him, had made all the difference. As the enemy ship vanished into the distance, John let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The cockpit was silent, save for the soft hum of the ship's engines. The adrenaline slowly ebbed away and he sank back into his seat. His heart was still racing, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from a sense of accomplishment, from the realization that he had done it. He had survived, and he had done so with the ship by his side. The ship's voice spoke one last time, its tone softer now, almost congratulatory. "You have proven yourself, traveler. You have unlocked your true potential. The galaxy is yours to explore. But remember, the journey is never truly over. There will always be challenges. There will always be enemies. But you are ready. You are the protector now, and this ship is yours." John closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of those words sink in. He was no longer just a man who had stumbled upon a rusty spaceship at a junk sale. He was a traveler, a protector, and a force in the galaxy. The ship had chosen him, and he had answered the call. The final decision had been made. And in that decision, John had found his redemption. The ship powered down slightly, its systems now calm, but John knew it was just waiting for the next adventure. It wasn't over. It was only the beginning. And as the stars twinkled outside the cockpit window, John set his course for the unknown, ready for whatever came next.